I'd like to welcome those of you to Ask Ellen. This is our fourth Ask Ellen that we've had this year. My name is Sarah Radigan. I'm with the Clay Center for Young Healthy Minds. And the reason you're here is to have Dr. Ellen Braaten answer your questions. So I'd like to introduce Ellen. Dr. Ellen Braaten of Massachusetts General Hospital is a clinical child psychologist and a researcher. She's also the executive director of the Learning and Emotional Assessment Program here at Mass General Hospital. And she's gonna talk through some helpful guidance on managing meltdowns and responding to big emotions and answer your questions. And so, Ellen, I'll turn it over to you to get started.
Thank you. I thought we could start with a few slides just so that we know what we're talking about when we're talking about big emotions and how to help kids through that. And this is a time of big emotions for all of us. So that's something that we need to keep in mind. There's nothing that's normal for us. And when things are not normal, we feel different. And so that's something that we've got to be generous with ourselves on and with our kids. So first thing I want to say, it's perfectly normal to feel anxious, overwhelmed, stressed. In fact, it would be sort of abnormal to not feel that way. And Sarah, when you asked me earlier, like, how was I? And I said, good, because I automatically sort of say good unless things aren't good. But then I thought, well, not really good, because none of us are really good. I mean, even if there are wonderful things happening in people's lives, it's still different. It's still tough. It's still not what we imagined. So even for wonderful things are happening, like people are having babies and getting married and getting engaged, it's still not the dream that you had. So it's okay to feel that sort of, feeling of resentment or sadness in the joy as well. And it's perfectly normal then for your kids to be the same way, that they're going to, kids all feel anxious and overwhelmed and stressed at times. And I think it might take on a little bit of a different flavor right now. So one of the best things we can do, and we'll probably be talking about this a lot because it's the number one thing we have, is to empathize and to reflect back what you hear. So taking the time to empathize, not just with your child, but also with yourself, can really be helpful. And when I mean empathize, sometimes, we can, one of the secrets I think of parenting is sometimes we don't always like our kids, especially when we're cooped up with them in the house. We love our children, but we don't always like our kids or like being around them. And that's okay. Like, love is like that. Like we don't always like the people we love. We don't always like ourselves either. And so taking some time to think about that, why am I feeling this way? Or it's okay to feel this way. Or, I just feel lousy right now and I'm just going to give myself a little pity party and just feel that way and move on. And to know that you are not alone in this. Like, there are 6 billion other people maybe feeling the same way, or let's just say 2 or 3 billion at least, we're feeling the same way right now. And that can in some ways be comforting. So let's just take a step back and talk a little bit about, why do kids have tantrums and meltdowns in the first place? Take COVID out of this and just say that kids throughout history have and will always have tantrums and meltdowns, because what kids are doing is they are trying to communicate with you something that they can't yet say with words. And so they might be feeling anxious, even things like being tired or hungry, or struggling with one of the things that we call sensory integration, meaning it's just too much. Some kids are really particularly sensitive to noise in the environment, or too much activity, or too many things going on all at one time. It could be for kids who are in school, it's things like being in the lunchroom can just feel like overwhelming. There's the senses of smell and sound and touch and taste, and it's just too much for them sometimes. And there are some kids who are just kind of primed for that. But really, we all at different times have trouble with sensory integration. Think about when you're in a crowded room, or an elevator, when you're feeling anxious and everybody is crowded together and it smells, or you can just think about those different times that you've even struggled with that. and then think about what it's like for a child who has difficulty with that all the time. And then I think it's important to say that tantrums are normative. It's something we should expect at certain times in development. And especially in those terrible 2 years, but around that time. So, from 1 to ages 4 or 5, once kids get to be into school age though, tantrums and meltdowns on a regular basis are not okay. And at any age, there's still an opportunity for a teachable moment to teach them about executive functioning and emotional literacy skills, meaning that we want to teach them how to identify their own emotions, how to put words to that, how to talk and express themselves through words. So really thinking about the tantrums as a time to teach your child something. They're teaching you something. They're saying that right now, whatever's happening in the environment, I'm feeling overwhelmed. And then it's your job as a parent to kind of help them find the words for that. Not always easy. So what are you going to do when you're in the middle of a meltdown? Well, one of the best things you can do is to keep calm. And I've told a lot of parents this, that one of our best tools in the toolbox is disinterest. The hardest thing to do as a parent, but to just be sort of like disinterested, like, boy, that's a bummer, and whether it's that, they've done something like, your 17-year-old smashed the car and, having to be sort of like, well, that's pretty bad. You're going to have to fix that. As opposed to like screaming and yelling about something, which is always what we want to do as a parent. But even with a 2-year-old, to sort of say, I see that you're really upset right now. But the fact that you hit the wall or messed up your room because there are all these toys around, yeah, that's too bad, because you're going to have to clean them up. And that disinterest is something that we underuse as parents. And it's something that really gets kids. Because what they're doing when they've done something that's kind of messed things up or tantrum, they want a reaction from you. And by not giving them that reaction, they've got to then kind of take some of that responsibility themselves. And so it's the hardest thing to do though. But it's really important. During a meltdown though, for yourself to be able to ground yourself or keep yourself grounded by, counting to 10. We teach kids to do that, but we can do that ourselves, to just take deep breaths, know that we're feeling like we want to scream as well. And sometimes we will. That's part of being a parent too. But the more you can do things like put down, wiggle your toes, or clench your hands, or, clench your jaw and just sort of take deep breaths, the better. At doing things like letting it play out, which is sort of like a form of that disinterest that I was talking about, like saying something like, I'm here when you're ready to calm down. I'm here to help you. I see that you're really, really upset right now, and I'll do anything I can to help you, but you're going to have to calm yourself down. And then for some kids, using things like connecting and physical touch can be helpful. For other kids, it's the absolute wrong thing to do. And you as a parent know what works for your child, but sometimes having a little bit of physical touch or rubbing their back when they're crying, stamping their feet on the floor can sometimes help. Afterwards, though, really reflecting on that with them, or even afterwards, sometimes even kids who don't want to be touched when they're really tantruming might really want that hug when it's all over. And for you to be able to say, you really lost it there, and you looked miserable. What can we do different next time? What do you think it was that made you so sad? What happened right now? And of course, you can't really do that with a 2-year-old. You can do it a little bit with a 2-year-old. And the older kids get, the more you can do that. It's really, we have tantrums as adults. We have tantrums in the car. We have tantrums in the shopping center line. We learn how to regulate our emotions. And that's what we're teaching our kids. But we can also reflect a little bit ourselves. Like, what is it that helps us in those times? And actually talk to our kids about that. And to say, sometimes I feel like screaming too. Everybody does. But we don't do that because it doesn't make us feel very good when it's all over. And it doesn't make the other people you love feel very good either. And that's a way of helping kids learn from these situations. The best thing we can do, though, is prevent tantrums. And when you see a tantrum starting, a few of the things that you can do as a parent is distract them. So do something different. And the younger the child, the easier the distraction. You know, you've got an 18-month-old and they look like they're going to just really hit the wall, you know, hit their limit for something. And, you know, giving them a little cookie or giving them something else that's different, or, you know, maybe they're asking for the cookie and we want to distract them with something else. But giving them something else to look at, they're very easily shifted in that direction. But also, you know, giving all older kids the opportunity to think about different things and be distracted by something. The other thing you might want to do is think about giving kids choices. And I would say giving them choices throughout the day when it's appropriate, not always. There are times when there are no choices to be had. You are the parent, and this is the way it is. And there are certain things that you know better than they do, and you cannot give choices. But when you can, that can help a lot. And sometimes only giving them two options rather than what would you like to do today, or what else could we do, can feel much more grounding for them. So think about, for example, you know, sometimes kids just tantrum a lot before a mealtime, and they can't even know what it is they want for dinner or want for breakfast, and giving them just a couple of choices to be able to make that decision a little bit easier is better. One of the things that doesn't really work is trying to reason with them. And it oftentimes, for a lot of us parents who are, you know, like to think about things, and, you know, I would guess a lot of parents here who are listening to this are ones who like a lot of information. And so we like to do that with our kids. Yes, oh yes, we've all been there. And so, you know, talking through or trying to understand while they're acting out in inappropriate ways, not before, not after, but while they're in, you know, like, oh, you know, maybe you should, like that sort of thing is not usually very helpful. And it sort of pulls you down a little bit. You want to be the authority. You want to be the sort of dispassionate authority, the empathic authority, but sort of dispassionate. Again, I'm really talking about these things as if it's so easy to implement them. These are some of the hardest things to do as a parent. But the more we're aware of it, the more that we can actually put it into place. And then one of the things you also want to think about, is this something that's not normative? And so if you're spending a lot of days, more days than not, having a child who's really tantruming and not just using their voice or, you know, crying, because there are certain kids who just are a little bit more teary than others. They just are born that way. They're colicky maybe as a baby, and they're always, you know, they grow up to be adolescents who are wonderfully impassioned about things. But you need to sort of know your child and what is not normal and what you can tolerate too. So if you're feeling like the days are really miserable because tantrums are so frequent, you want to talk, and I think Sarah mentioned this before, connecting with your primary care provider. There are a lot of providers who have opportunities for you to connect with them via Zoom. Most providers are not doing in-person sessions right now. I don't want to speak for everybody, but it's really more the norm right now to be able to connect with people virtually. But the upside of that is that there are more opportunities to connect with them. And I think that if you're feeling really overwhelmed and stressed, reaching out is the absolute best thing to do. And you might just find that what you're feeling is normal. But sometimes a mental health provider or your primary care physician, your pediatrician, can help you figure that out. And you don't want to suffer alone, especially at this time right now when all of us are so much more alone than we've ever been in our lives before. So make sure that you're reaching out and consulting other professionals and also other people in your life that you trust. Maybe it is your mother or your mother-in-law, or maybe it's your aunt, or maybe it's not those people, but know who it is that you would trust, who knows, somebody who knows a lot about, you know, child development and behavior, and who's able to be empathic to you. Those are the sorts of people that you should really be cultivating those relationships right now in different sorts of ways. So I will stop right there and go back to talking with Sarah and seeing if we have any kinds of questions.
Yeah, and you know, the one thing I didn't say at the start, first, thank you, Ellen. That was actually have a comment I'll share, but for those of you who have tuned in, if you would like to ask Ellen a question, you should see a Q&A, a little Q&A, and somewhere in your Zoom browser window. If you click on that, that's where you can enter a question and we'll be able to see it. We also have a couple questions that we've gotten before that I can go to, but Ellen, I wanted to say the reasoning thing really resonated. I fall down the reason trap so often with my 6-year-old, and it's not until halfway through that I'm like, wait a second, no.
And think about it, what it feels like for a 6-year-old. Think about when somebody's trying to reason with us that we're not at their level, either for whatever reason. If they're trying to teach us something that we can't understand, like somebody's going to reason with me on quantum physics, yeah, I have no idea what you're talking about. And so what does that do? It just makes us actually not feel better. It makes us sort of feel like worse in a way. So we think we're doing the right thing. And in part, it's because, generations ago, parents would have just screamed or yelled or hit their kids even. I mean, that's how these sorts of tantrums and behaviors were handled 50 or more years ago. So we're trying to develop that as a society too. And that's what we kind of do. We like to talk in our society. But it's really not, to even just say, there's not a lot I can say right now other than to let you know that I'm here when you calm down, and I see you're really upset, and let me know. And again, it's like we want to talk. It's just how we're wired.
Anyway, all right. Well, I'm going to turn to one of the questions that we have because I want to make sure we get to them all. And I'm going to share this one first because we are in the days of COVID, and I know a lot of caregivers are having to just use more screen time than maybe we used to, because it's just what we got to do. I'm one of them. So we had a question from someone that their 8-year-old their 8-year-old does watch TV sometimes, and that they have tantrums when it's time to turn it off. But it's a struggle because they actually need to occasionally let them watch the TV, so they can't just not have it. So they're just it sounds like they're trying to figure out how to manage meltdowns when it comes to turning the TV off.
Off and on too. Like I've heard this from a lot of parents. So I don't mind the video games now because I don't know what else to do. And it used to be that I would say to parents, just tell your kids to go out and play, but they can't even do that. They can't go out and play with the neighborhood kids safely, really. So it's difficult. What you really need to be right now is conscious of what you're doing. And so sometimes I do find that parents aren't consistent with their kids about the TV watching, and the kids are rebelling, not necessarily about the TV watching, but why things feel so random. So be sure that you are very clear about how much, if you're really, you want only this much time on the TV per day, to just start the day by saying that, we're all sort of struggling right now with this TV stuff, Billy. And I want to make sure today, let's talk about, so we've got this much time that you're on there. Where do you want to spend that time? What do you want to do? What I think happens with a lot of families is that may work, except that maybe tomorrow that same thing doesn't work because they've got a Zoom meeting with their boss that they didn't expect. So now they say to their child, after their 4 hours or whatever of TV time is over, go watch the TV. So now that's confusing for the child, because now when they're done with their meeting and they tell their child, turn the TV off, the child's like, what just happened? Because I thought now the rules weren't applying. And so think a lot about how you're doing this, because sometimes it is us and it's not the child having trouble. That being said, a lot of kids do have trouble getting off the TV. And I think in that case, a lot of, parents have probably heard this before, but it really does work, a lot of prompting before time. Hey, I just want to let you know, 30 minutes or even an hour, when this show is over, start thinking about what you want to do after. And even saying, put the TV on pause. What are you going to do when this is done? because that's also kind of tough for kids. They're feeling a little bit down. I'm hearing this from a lot of kids that they are feeling, sort of like, well, what else am I supposed to do? Like, I'm not in school. I'm not, I can't really go out and play like I used to. I can't have friends over. What am I going to do next? So kind of getting them to think a little bit about the future after the time on the TV is over can be really helpful. None of these are going to fix the problem. It's going to be tough. And just, again, being open and honest and really a lot of reflection and empathy and saying, like, I know it's really hard. I feel like sitting and watching TV all day too, but we can't, because we're not going to feel great if we do that every day. So what else can we do?
Oh, that's a great idea. Yeah, that's a great tip, to just have that next activity planned in their heads. So that, it's not just, so that's a good one. And then another one I wanted to bring up, because this is a challenge that a lot of kids and caregivers are dealing with. Kids can't see their friends in person. So we had a question from someone that their 13-year-old daughter really misses seeing her friends, and they've been arguing more and more about it, to the point that it just sounds like there are some big outbursts at times, anytime she asks, and the parent has to say no. So she's not sure how to resolve this.
Yeah, I think this is a big problem for parents. And also, it's not just a problem for parents with their kids, but with other parents. That's what I'm hearing a lot, that not all parents are doing the same things. And that's what's making it really tough for kids, is that they hear that so-and-so is, their parents allow them to have friends over and they're not. So with a 13-year-old, you actually can do some reasoning, but still you're the authority. And I think that's the one thing that you have to remember as a parent, like, I'm the one who knows better. And I know that that's hard sometimes for a 13-year-old to hear, because they really do think they know better. And, of course, we all know that someday they'll know that they don't. That's how that's how life happens. I think that one of the things you want to do is acknowledge how difficult this is for them. And I think you need to do it over and over and over again. It's not just a one-time thing. This is every single day of their life. They are missing their friends. They are not able to really think about the future. And to be honest, we don't know what the future holds. And so, I'm hoping that a year from now, things will be back to normal. But do we really know? Like, in March, did we think this is what November would be like? Probably not. So we need to acknowledge that, and we need to do it a lot. And it's hard to get in that mindset when you are also feeling the same sort of way. So talking about that with your child is important. Therapy is really a lot about, probably 90% about validating somebody's experience, and then 10% of putting that experience into a coherent narrative. And so being able to say to your child, this is really tough. You seem so sad. And this is, you miss your friends, whatever it is that they are telling you, even sometimes just reflecting back what they're saying, like literally using their words and saying it right back to them, I think is one of the best things we can do. Again, that's a lot of what psychotherapy really is. And then putting it together into a coherent narrative, making, sort of talking about, well, what is going on? How do we make sense of this all? How do we organize this? And that's why doing things like keeping a journal or some kind of a ritual, even a daily ritual or a weekly ritual that your child can do with her friends or with a family or something, so to make this time much more of a story. I really do believe, and maybe I'm just being a little bit Pollyannish here, but I don't think so. I think this generation of kids is going to be much more resilient than we can imagine. And we talk a lot about the generations of kids before who had it so easy, and all the problems that they have, and this isn't that generation. And I think that they're going to be better for it, actually. And I hate to say that, because it's like, we don't wish this on anyone, but challenges, that's what makes us resilient. You can't be resilient unless you've been challenged. So this really is kind of an opportunity. The challenge for us is to make sure that they get on the other side without being too depressed, without being too anxious, with their self-esteem intact. And talking with other kids about it and being in groups, making sure that your child does have the opportunity to socialize with friends in appropriate manners. And then also asking them, so what do we do? So here's the situation. What would you do if you were me? If I pretend you're me, what would you do? Present them with the evidence. You'd be surprised at how many 13-year-olds would say, well, what I would say is what you're saying, but that's not what I want you to say. Okay, well, now we've got a different discussion here. And so it kind of gives you an opportunity to try some of these things out.
That's great. I have another question for you. I know we're getting close to end of time, but let's do this anyway, see what we can get through. So this is an interesting one because it involves siblings. We have someone who's saying, I have identical twins. And so by nature, their relationship and interactions can be complicated and bounce back and forth between meltdowns. And I can do great with one, but then the second one comes in and it's just hard to immediately be able to do the same thing with the other one without, it's just, I don't know, how do you manage when you've got two, especially identical, same age? And you talked about being some strategies for the parent or caregiver early on, but when you've got two, how do you balance that? How do you do that? And they can see each other and how you're reacting to the other one. So.
Did they say how old the?
Oh, let's see. I don't have an age. I don't know if, let's see. Oh, let me look. There's actually another one too about the twin daughters, actually. Let's see.
Why you're looking at
5 years old. So here we go. So 5 years old. And as a follow-up, this is the same person. I lost it. Oh, here we go. Yeah, they bounce off of each other with the good and hard feelings. So they can take it very personally if something doesn't match their expectation. And for example, she's expecting me to pass her spoon. And she says, Mom, can I have the spoon? And I say, no, joking sometimes because, you have, but she'll burst into big tears and have a complete meltdown. Because it just didn't match. Maybe it didn't match what they were expecting. So,
yeah, I think in that case, with a 5-year-old, first of all, you can't treat your kids identically, and even what this parent is asking about is what parents struggle with even when they don't have identical twins, and so it is a little bit different when they are they're both at the same point in the same time. So you're not saying, well, he got to do it when or why is she getting to do that? When I was that age, I wasn't allowed to do that. But you have to just sort of acknowledge that, kids are different and that it's your job as a parent to figure out what's best for them. And I think letting them know that is good. It's difficult, I think, because identical twins in general have, like this parent said, a different sort of relationship. And so that's almost separate from any other kind of relationship that we have as humans. And so getting to understand them separately, but also together. I think in talking to them a little bit about how to acknowledge their feelings and express them without impacting the other one or ruining themselves or the relationship in the process is something to think about. I think in that case where the parent was asking, the child was like, this isn't what I expected. Afterwards, or even during, if it's possible to say, well, what were you expecting? And to be able to analyze that afterwards can be really helpful, because you can say, when you think about it, life is filled with things, more often we get what we didn't expect than what we expected. And so it's something that you can kind of talk to them about. Well, what did you want? And was that realistic that that's what you wanted. And then in this case, to even say, mommy wasn't even being, I was just joking there. Of course I love you. Sometimes those sorts of tears and tantrums come because kids are just feeling insecure. So finding that place where they're feeling a little bit insecure is also important.
Oh. No, that's yeah, I find that whole expectation thing is where my own 6-year-old has the biggest, like, he's expecting something to happen and it doesn't, and it just, he'll lose it. So
I think, that this is really important because it's kind of at the root. What we're talking about here is self-regulation. And it's not about not feeling those big feelings. It's about being able to acknowledge them and express them without ruining yourself or the people you love in the process. And so that's kind of what you've got to think of as key, that, yeah, that disappointment, that feels terrible when you're expecting something and you don't get it. And so what do you do with that? How can you regulate those emotions? And it's really then, that really is being able to regulate those emotions really is teaching your child how to handle stress in general. Because we feel stressed out because we can't handle our emotions. Yes, oftentimes there's too much to do, or we're in a situation that is stressful. But what makes it more stressful is that we're not able to regulate what we can regulate, which is what we're feeling ourselves. So being able to have your child acknowledge those, here's how I was feeling, here's what I was feeling, and here's what I could have done, things like taking deep breaths or running around the room or punching a bag or whatever it is, those sorts of strategies. And then also teaching them the strategy of asking for support. That is, when I feel out of control, instead of screaming, to be able to say, I really need you right now. Like, that's the sort of thing that is what adaptive, those are adaptive skills. That's what healthy adults do when they're feeling overwhelmed. Or sometimes adults say, I just need to be alone right now. So teaching your kids those things too, who are the people that I want to talk to when I'm feeling overwhelmed, or maybe I want to hug instead of, I want to scream. And one last thing too is teaching your kids that emotions start in the brain, but they start at a different part of the brain. It's that impulsive part of our brain. And we can teach them a little bit about how brains work, because kids like science. They kind of like explanations for this stuff. So being able to say that when you feel something, that's the part of your brain that really wants to act. They want to scream, they want to like run and kiss and hug somebody. It's all those things. But what we need to do when we're feeling those sorts of overwhelming feelings is to strengthen that part of the brain that helps us think through what a good reaction to that is at the time. So helping your kids sort of say that, what we're going to do is, we're going to feel those feelings, and then we're going to think for a second. We're going to take a deep breath, or we're going to think, and we're going to say, okay, what does the thinking part of my brain do? And to kind of think about that as kind of giving your brain exercise. That's the part of your brain that really needs to be strengthened, like muscles. And kids they can understand that sort of stuff, and they kind of like it, actually. So.
Well, thank you. No, this is really helpful. Some strategies I can apply to. Thank you for being with us today. We are over time, so I guess we'll wrap up. If there are any questions we didn't get to, we will post Ellen's answers and the event on our Facebook page. So you can go there after. And also, again, this video was being recorded, so we'll make it available once it's ready for those, if you want to tune in again and as a refresher. Thanks everyone for joining us. Ellen, thank you.
You're welcome.
And for those of you, if you found this helpful, please visit the Clay Center online at mghclaycenter.org. We have so many more resources to support you and supporting the young people in your life. And thanks for all that you do. We'll see you next time.